Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and sharing this very, very special occasion, one that we have been working toward for a quarter of a century. So let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we humbly bow to you all. O Divine Mother, help us release all bonds of karma, that we might soar in complete freedom into the skies of union with Thee. We are Thine, be Thou ours. Om. Peace. Amen. I'd like to invite the singers to come up.
I'd like to offer 3 songs by Swami Kriyananda this morning. Brave are the people, a new tomorrow, and many hands make a miracle.
Our Lord of mankind did this duty bestow. Glad our children who people these hills, glad in the vision their hearts understand. What became of past struggles, now the records are still, but courage still lingers, giving strength to the land. Men hunger for riches, for power and for fame. By favor they think they will grow. The battles they fight, the victories they win, are never the victories they know. Men hunger for riches, for power and for fame. By favor they think they will grow. The battles they fight, the victories they win, are never the victories they know. Brave were the people who lived in these hills, brave the great warriors who confronted the foe, to defend what is holy, to defend what is true. Our Lord of mankind did this duty bestow. Our Lord of mankind did this duty bestow. When the dawn breaks and then the morning sends the sun high in the sky, who would hide from heaven's glory? Who would pass the challenge by? La 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 la. There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 la. Even so, all of us together can create a better land. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a Even so, all of us together can create a better land. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. La 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 la. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle, people climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful when people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, and all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle, people climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. We lift our hands to welcome the sun.
Well, many hands made this miracle possible. In fact, probably everyone in the audience virtually participated in one way or another. But this morning we're going to feature those who were really on the front, very front of the front lines. So primarily John Parsons, our dear friend and our legal counsel through all of this, through the entire 12 years of litigation, and also Nidruva. Now, many of you know Nidruva as the editor of Clarity Magazine, but Nidruva is also a lawyer in her own right, was a graduate of Harvard Law School, and had a very active practice in the Bay Area before she moved here and before she was involved in Ananda's litigation. And so the two of them will speak. But I thought I might set the stage a little bit of the years that led up to the lawsuit. As you all know, Swamiji was thrown out of SRF in 1962, and then he had a period that was really quite difficult for him, trying to tune in to find what Master wanted him to do with his life, how he wanted him to lead it. Master, of course, told him that I want you to write and edit. And he didn't say anything about communities, but he, of course, knew of Swamiji's great enthusiasm for that idea, and Master himself had enormous enthusiasm for the subject of communities, and started some that didn't last. It was not yet the right time for them to last. So at any rate, during these couple of years, during which Swami was trying to really feel what Master wanted him to do, he came up with the thought of writing, of lecturing, and of editing. And then shortly after that began Ananda. So Ananda started in 1968. And So from the time that Ananda started, say, call it 1970, by the time people were here and Swamiji was living here and we were really underway, from that time up until 1990, which is when the lawsuit started, Swamiji was still being very, very tentative about not wanting to do anything that would offend Self-Realization Fellowship. And so to a certain extent, he was dancing on eggshells a little bit in certain areas, certainly not the thrust of his life, but in certain areas it was a little bit that way. There was a time in which we had already, previous to this, been threatened a couple of times with a lawsuit by Self-Realization Fellowship. One time was when Swamiji decided that he would go ahead, since it was out of print, publish the book that he had written during the years that he was a monk in SRF, that he would publish the book Stories of Mukunda, which is about Master's boyhood growing up and some adventurous stories. And it's a wonderful book. But when we published that, he got a letter from SRF threatening a lawsuit, and that you'd better withdraw that. And he didn't, and that just ended up passing away. He felt, obviously, I wrote the book. They're suppressing the book. Why can't we publish it? And they probably didn't feel that it was a big enough deal to try to actually begin a lawsuit. But we had heard that they had also threatened other people or groups that were trying to spread Master's message during those years. And so there was growing a sense that dharmically this just is not right. And there was also growing, mainly in Swamiji, but many others here, the sense that why should we tiptoe around certain things? Why not act just as we feel Master would want us to act and do what Master would want us to do? And so in probably late, maybe in 1990, I'm not sure, there was a community meeting. Swamiji called a community meeting, and he said, I feel that the real name of Master's teachings, religion if you might call it, but of course it's not really a religion, but the real name is self-realization. We had been using a variety of different names, including Ananda Church of God Realization, so we'd gone through some name changes, but he said the real name that Master used was self-realization, and I think that we ought to use that name. And it was in Swamiji's dome, and there was quite a bit of discussion, and the majority of people were for it. Brave are the people that live in these hills. And so we were all in favor. There were a few naysayers, and one man said, I remember quite clearly, it is going to be very dangerous to do this, because if we do this and they sue, we might spend $1 million. And we laugh now, but it pretty much scared the rest of us at that time. So, at any rate, in spite of that, we decided to go ahead and change the name of our legal name to Ananda Church of Self-Realization. And within a very short period of time, within a month or two after we actually did that, we got a letter from a lawyer representing SRF, and as John describes it in his book, and I'm not going to take his material, but he said it was on very important looking letterhead with directors and partners down the left-hand side, and signed with a huge black pen, meaning we really mean this. And so then we ignored it, and then the rest of the story follows from that. And I'm going to let John tell it, but this is the wonderful book. He won't tell as much detail as is in this book, but if you want to know the inside story of the lawsuit years, this is the book that will tell you that. And many, many people have described this as a page turner that they couldn't put down and kept them up all night long. So if you haven't read it, it is an extremely good read. And so in those early days when we were in desperation, we called on John to help us, and now I call on John once again to help us.
What a beautiful day. What a beautiful day. And what a pleasure it is to be here with you. I'm supposed to talk about the lawsuit, and I'm going to. But I want to first spend a couple moments and talk about things more important. And one of them is what you guys have done here. They put me up at the guest house, which I imagine many of you have not had the pleasure of staying there yet, and it is a wonderful place. And I woke up with the sun in the morning, and I walked out. They've got a nice little balcony, a porch raised up as the land floats away down into the valley below you. And I got up with the sun, and I was out on that porch at about a little before 6 in the morning. And I'm out there, and I'm hearing the birds in the trees. I had a little music on my CD player, some choral singing in the background, so angelic sounds of voices coming from inside, the birds up in the trees calling, up in the sky gently circling these raptors who seem to just float without ever beating their wings. And then I hear these sounds, and coming up the trail, there's these goats. And there are 24 goats who proceed to come up this trail, bleating, walking along, led by this medallion goat who apparently is in charge of the whole operation. And then bringing up the rear is this donkey. And then the goats are making their way, and the donkey is very studiously there, and the donkey's not saying anything, but he's looking at all of these goats, and it suddenly occurs to me that this donkey is either guarding or I was going to say shepherding, but goat herding the goats. All right? And the donkey's standing there, and he's looking at these goats, and it's like they're talking together. All right? And suddenly I think to myself, I wish I could talk to the animals. And you know how the domino of thoughts start tumbling in your mind? And I'm thinking, talking to the animals. St. Francis, Assisi, Swami. And suddenly, there are moments when everything is connected. Everything is connected with a beauty and a harmony, a simplicity, and a truth. And that's what you guys have done. That's what I'm so appreciative about. Is you have created this community where moments like this can happen just in a morning. A morning walking out on a porch to experience this worldwide connectivity. All people tied together in a seamless web. And that's rare in this world. that is very, very rare in this world. And at the same time, somehow it all came together. Not only Assisi and here and Swami and us, but the past and the present. It's all like a river, and we can stand at a point in that river. We can stand on the razor's edge of the moment that we are experiencing. But we perceive, like I rarely do in the world, we have moments when we perceive that it is all one flow. We're all bound together. I'm not certain I would have had that without the opportunity that you guys gave me. And I thank you very much for everything that you have done. I will always be grateful for that. Now, something else too, and the other day at the, what was that, the introduction or the orientation or whatever it is, Joe Tish said some kind words about my role in helping Anand to be what it is, and I do not mean to gainsay those kind words or that thought. I appreciate the thought and even more the expression of that thought. But that's not really true. That's not really true. It was a comment a few minutes ago, if everyone involved in the lawsuit, like I was involved in the lawsuit, like Nidruva was involved in the lawsuit, if all the people who were involved in the lawsuit were up here, there'd be no one out there to applaud us at the end. So I will assume the easy burden of being the walking embodiment of everything that you guys have done, as long as we all understand, as long as I always understand, that it's a convenient fiction so that we may celebrate together that thing that we have all done. Now, the lawsuit is over, but is it? All right. What's it all mean? I like that Alfie movie. What's it all about? What's it all about, Alfie? Well, the lawsuit was a very important and historical event. The Civil War was a very important and historical event. The Battle of Hastings. You get where I'm going. We have behind us in our collective past a seemingly endless stream, here's its stream again, of important historical events. And at the time, it's very important, very important. And it's like Henry V on the eve of the Battle of Agincourt, calls out Bedford and Exeter and specific people. And they all played their role. And you have all played your role, some more of a role, but every role is essential. Some people got their names mentioned in the book, but you can only mention so many names in my book. And I want you to understand that I tried to honor all of you in doing it, even though I could not mention all of you in the book. Because it was a collective endeavor, which perhaps now is history. And like the Civil War, we can talk about battles and we can roll up our sleeve and show our wounds. Okay? Again, Henry V. But I submit to you. And I got to tell you, please, if you haven't read the book, I suggest you do, because when I sat down and actually wrote it, I had forgotten a lot of the zany antics, a lot of the vibrant personalities that went into the history of the litigation, and that's worthy of telling, and I think worthy of reading once or twice. But it is also worthy of moving beyond. We are at a transition point, aren't we? So many things have come together, so many things have flowered into full bloom. The movies out there, the books out there, The lawsuit is now paid off. Paid off. And that's you guys. That's right. Okay? I am a mirror up here reflecting back to you at this moment the achievements that you have done. But what do we make of it? What do we make of it? You know, like the Civil War, it can be used academically to explain much of the world we see around us today. Why do these two streams from Yogananda's teachings, why are they not one larger river? Why are they two separate streams still? And you know, the lawsuit speaks to that, but it doesn't give us perhaps a direction. It doesn't give us the meaning of these things in a way which we human beings, for some reason or other, we seem to need to, you know, suck meaning like a weasel sucks eggs out of things, you know. So, if you need the meaning, that's great. If you're willing to just experience it as a flow of events, well, you know, that's great too. That's great too. But I submit to you, at this point, the details, the battles of that fight, the victories of that fight, they're good. I like labels. I like being able to put labels on things, and I like being able to put positive labels on things. But you know, the world that we live in works at so many levels simultaneously. I'm just constantly confused. I'm constantly amazed. I'm just amazed at things. So, levels of confusion. We fought a battle in which there were good guys and there were bad guys. There were victories and there were defeats. Well, my friends, so much duality. Is that just so much delusion? What does it mean? What does victory mean in a legal context? Well, I submit it doesn't matter what victory means in a legal context. I will tell you now, having won the battle, the winning happened inside the hearts and minds of the people who participated in it. Participated actively, participated in it by praying, by emotional support, by financial support. Let's not forget that on this happy day. But what does that mean? We won. We made mistakes along the way. We made right decisions along the way. We were always guided by what we thought and felt to be dharmic, which is part of the subtitle of the book. And that, I submit to you, is perhaps what it's all about. Had we lost, but lost dharmically, we would have still been victorious. And the idea that we have done something where we can put a label of victory on it, and I'm happy to do that, doesn't detract from what I see to be the real meaning of it, and that is the way that the Ananda community responded to the lawsuit. As you can see, by the way, I'm afraid I'm not going to give you many juicy details from the book at all today. So you're going to have to buy it and read it, I'm afraid. But I anticipate they'll be conveniently located at some desk around here. So what do I, at least, and I speak only for myself here, and that's another thing I love about Ananda. You plant seeds, and everyone seems to reap some different flower from it. It's just an amazing garden of variety and personal experiences that play into the seeds that Swami has planted and other people have planted here now in the community. Well, I'm going to do my own little harvesting here. I think the lawsuit, personally, means three things. None of it has anything to do with winning or losing. None of it has to do with the personalities involved on the other side. None of it has to do with the right steps and the missteps. But here's what I see it is. It is an opportunity. It is an opportunity on an ongoing basis, every day, to acknowledge those around us. It is an opportunity every day for gratitude. And it is an opportunity every day for a renewed commitment. I want to talk just a few minutes about that, and I'm going to invite Nidruva up here, who's going to share some of her own experiences and some things she's taken away from it. Acknowledgement. Well, I've partly done that already. You know, the book is the product. As I've said before on my stump speeches on the Om Tour, they're my words, but they're your story. And that's so important. In writing the book, I've tried to acknowledge you. And I feel that you acknowledge those around you for what they have done. And I think that is perhaps one of the key lessons of the book. Many hands make a miracle. And we can acknowledge those who have worked together to make this happen. And in the acknowledgement, it's not only that we did things, that you did things, but more that we can do things, that you can do things more and more on an ongoing basis. The lawsuit will forever be history and will forever recede behind us. The opportunity to acknowledge yourselves and those around you is a daily blessing. Second of all, gratitude. Wow. Gratitude at so many levels. We do our best, and then powers greater than us make things happen. We push, someone else steers. We try our best, and we are grateful for whatever it is we're given. For whatever it is we're given is an opportunity for us to learn, is an opportunity for us to grow. And we need to be grateful. And I'm grateful, of course, at even more levels. I got brought into this fascinating lawsuit. You know, the last thing a client wants to hear when you're sitting in a lawyer's office is, "This is a fascinating lawsuit." Why? This is a bottomless pit of opportunity. Let me tell you the documents I can generate on these fascinating. Wow. But it's true. And I'm grateful at that level. And I hope, and I think that each of you at this point, having now passed from under the clouds that hung over us for so many years, that each of you too are grateful for the opportunities that it presented to each of you, for your internal reflection, your external expression of support and commitment, and your expression of love. It is hard not to comment on the lawsuit without some comment on Swami's transition. And it's too soon for me to even know quite what to make of that yet, you know. Again, I feel it's almost like seeds that are planted, and now we have the expectation of what is to come from it. Again, I've used, I think on one of the talks, I mentioned the situation of the disciples on the Saturday after Christ's crucifixion and before the Sunday of his resurrection, and on how long that Saturday must have been, how filled with doubt that day must have been, and wonder, was it all worthwhile? Am I on the right path? And you know, there's moments, at least for me, to take our current situation in some light like that. Swami is transitioned onto a higher level of existence, and we are still here on this plane. And I know some of us must wonder and feel some uncertainty on the future. And yet, I believe, based upon what I have seen in the lawsuit, what I have seen since, what I have seen in this wonderful community, that we are on that Saturday before the next great phase. The next great phase. And that adventure is now in your hands. And yet, Swami played such a key role in the lawsuit. Well, in fact, the lawsuit was, one could argue the lawsuit was between two people. Well, three people, a couple sisters and Swami. And there again, these things work at so many levels in such intricate ways that it's hard to tease out one thing. What, like the Civil War. What caused the Civil War? And it goes on, and economics and personalities and politics and all of that. But it happened, and the lawsuit happened. And the question is, how did you respond to that? And you have responded well. And in light of that, I have every expectation that we are just on the cusp of a new, brighter, brilliant Ananda, which is spreading throughout the world as it has been and will continue to do so. So gratitude. I am grateful for the lawsuit. I am grateful that we had this opportunity together. And it is an amazing adventure, but only part of the adventure. We've closed, use some publishing analogies here, we've closed that chapter. And I'm so excited to read the next one as it's being written. Well, commitment. I have never seen a more committed group of people. Good times, bad times, sunshine, and shower. It's just inspiring, and I trust that you inspire one another because you should. I'm coming from the outside and still with my feet very much in the mud of a workaday world and litigation. It's just like this fresh little breeze here. It's a breath of fresh air to come up here and feel the clean energy, the support, the wonderful vibrations. The donkey down in the trail and the ass on the porch, and we all fit together. and we all fit together. And so I wanted to share with you my gratitude, and I wanted to encourage in you what should be a sense of gratitude if you haven't experienced that already, and I kind of suspect you have. But not only for what you have done, for Swami's leadership through these difficult times, through Jyotish and Devi's leadership on the more local level throughout the entire lawsuit. And I just got to tell you, it's just the most amazing thing in the world that I have ever seen. And while I played a part in it, in fact, I tell you what, I was thinking the other day, so last night Jyotish was saying how, I had a pivotal role, important role in Ananda today. And I was thinking at that moment, I drove up here. I've been on the road driving up here. And my gas pedal played a pivotal role in me driving up here. As did the carburetor. In that tank of gas and the wheels and the tires and the axles, and I think you see what I mean. And so I am happy for those kind words, but I want to reflect them back to you. And I want to thank you on this beautiful day, where we should all be pleased with ourselves, but of course not too much, lest we become deluded with that ego orientation. But we should be pleased that we were the gas pedal and the transmission and the tires and the wheels, and we all played a part. And we can all celebrate today, and we can all look forward on this beautiful day to the beautiful days to come. And I want to thank you, and I'm going to invite Nidruva up here to share some of her experiences. What a world, my friends.
Well, good morning, everyone. What I thought I'd do today is to try to share the flavor of the lawsuit by focusing on two recurring aspects, and that's how Swami participated in it, or how I got to work with Swami is more what I'm going to talk about, actually, and also the role of grace in the lawsuit, because grace played a big part. And so I've selected two instances of working with Swamiji which were very representative of the kinds of things that happened over the course of the lawsuit. One was very early in the lawsuit, and it was when we were we had gained some momentum at this point. I want to set the stage. We had a few victories under our belt. I think SRF had been unmasked in the district court. The court kind of knew what they were dealing with, Judge Garcia specifically, and we were gaining favor with the judge, so we weren't in that total underdog position at that point. But they had succeeded in getting an injunction against us in the early months of the lawsuit, and we were at the point we had established that self-realization was a generic term. The court had ruled on that. And we won a couple of other important copyright victories, thanks to John Parsons. And so we were now ready to get that injunction lifted. We had been prohibited from using the term self-realization. We were calling ourselves the Ananda Church of God Realization. And we had a disclaimer in all our literature, we are not affiliated with SRF. And so we were getting that injunction lifted. It's a very important motion. And all the troops from Ananda Village came down, as they always did. Latika and Seva, and Parvati was probably part of it. And there were many. Leela Swami's cook, she always would come down if there was time. So we were all working together to get this motion done. And staying up late was not unusual for us at this point, because we always stayed up late, especially when we were nearing the filing date. And we had put our hearts and souls into this motion. And somehow there came a moment, and I can only attribute it in retrospect to a little ripple of karma, when I lost track of something really important, and that was to do a final polishing of the brief. There's a big difference between the second last version and the last version. I assure you. And somehow, even to this day, I don't know how it happened, except there was a little ripple of karma, probably greatly mitigated, now knowing how karma works. And maybe mitigated even by Swamiji, who wrapped his aura around all of us. But I forgot to do somehow that final editing, and we submitted the papers. And we got a good night's sleep, and the next morning I got up and I read the papers. And I was horrified. I mean, the citations hadn't been finalized, not all of them at least. I had planned to shift some things around and make it a tighter presentation that hadn't been done. I mean, the information was there, but it was not polished by any means. And let me just jump ahead and say the opposition just jumped on it. Did you see this in that brief? You see that in their opposition brief? Want to make sure the court didn't miss it. So, but the point I'm trying to make was how Swami worked with us. People are more important than things. And Swami, at that point in the lawsuit, read every brief with the utmost care. And the point I want to make, he never said a word about it. Not one word. I was waiting. but he never said a word. And I so appreciated that because it was hard, very hard. More than that, we normally get our rulings in a couple of months, and we have to wait on motions like this. We started moving ahead on some other fronts, doing the work. And at that point in the lawsuit, Swami was in regular contact with me. He called often every day. We talk. We were starting the research, doing the groundwork for the next thrust. And he said after about 3 weeks from when we filed our papers, no, they filed their opposition brief. We filed our reply. What he said when I filed the reply, he said, the closest thing to a hint that he had noticed that I hadn't polished that brief, he said, spare no effort to do a thorough job. That's all he said. I got the point. But about 3 weeks after we had filed our reply brief, I was talking to Swami on the phone, and he said, I think we're going to win. I said, oh, this is good. I said, well, let's hope so, Swamiji. And so we're going a little further into this process, maybe the 6-week mark. Sheila, I think we're going to win. I really think we're going to win. And I realized I think he had that kind of farsightedness to see that, but he was also trying to reassure me. He never did that at any other point. And in fact, we did win, and we won resoundingly. So it was an example of grace, I do believe. And I learned an important lesson about Swamiji and about how you work with people. He was just totally supportive the whole time. And there's another story that's more toward the end of the litigation that I want to share about Swamiji, but there's something that happened just before then that really exemplified more dramatically, I think, than almost any other single motion or decision, the operation of grace throughout those years. SRF used every possible legal theory they could come up with to claim that they had exclusive rights to the use of Yogananda's name and image, meaning his picture, or likeness, even a sketch. And they claimed that they had trademarked his name and his image, and we defeated that early on in the lawsuit. But we are now in 1997. We've been litigating for 7 years. There was still one more theory that was there that they were relying upon, hopefully, to win the right to use Yogananda's name exclusively. By that, what they were trying to do was to prevent us from saying, we promote Yogananda's teachings prominently in our promotional literature. We are an organization dedicated to the teachings of Yogananda. We couldn't have a picture of him in anything that was closely associated to Ananda's name in a promotional context. That was their goal. And they were still trying to achieve that goal in 1997 by invoking a fairly obscure state law relating to publicity rights. Now, today we know more about publicity rights than I certainly did at that point, but I'll tell you a story about publicity rights that involves one of our members, and I think it'll convey what they're all about. Tandava called me at one point. Tandava from Palo. Is he here? Yes. Steve Jobs, is that how you pronounce his name? Steve Jobs. I live up here. I don't have a television. Steve Jobs had just died, and Tandava had a very good idea from a promotional standpoint. It's been said that he read the autobiography every day or every year, cover to cover, whatever it was, and he wanted to use that to promote East-West Bookshop. Is that correct? It was along those lines. And someone said, you might want to check with Naidruva about that. and he did. He called, and we talked. I said, his name doesn't belong to just anyone. That's there's a concept called publicity rights, and the right to use his name in any public context belongs to those that he has willed it to in his will, or if there's no will, who are his heirs by law. I said, it's worth money, you know. And we see sports figures, we see movie stars, we see all kinds of people who capitalize on their fame, and those are publicity rights. You know what it's all about. So we had established at that point in the case that Yogananda, because of his stature, because of his prominence, qualified as someone who had publicity rights. And SRF was trying to say they had his rights exclusively. Well, it was a very obscure provision, and there wasn't much case law on it. And I remember there one evening, I was sitting in the downstairs of the townhouse in Mountain View, looking at the papers, looking at all the research we'd done, and saying, we don't have enough to bring a motion on this and to get rid of this case. Just sitting there. And now, summary judgment motions are a way of getting rid of a lawsuit without a trial. And we all know how expensive a trial is. And we had filed, by that time, 8 or 9, maybe 10 of them, kind of taking SRF's case apart, motion by motion. And if the law doesn't support you, you can file a motion for summary judgment. If you don't have the facts, you can file a motion for summary judgment. And we did that consistently, and we won consistently. But here we are, we've got a strange law, and they're saying that Yogananda gave his publicity rights to them, and they've got a very kind of generally stated assignment where he assigned certain properties to them that they're relying upon. So they've got some basis for this. He is a deceased personality, as the statute defines it. They had an assignment, and we had nothing. We had absolutely nothing. We had nothing to refute their claim that they had an exclusive right to use his name, image, and likeness. That's the language of the statute. And so I was sitting there in my Palo Alto townhouse this evening. It was late in the evening. I was looking, had everything spread. I was sitting cross-legged, everything spread out, looking at everything in front of me. And I'm thinking, what can we even say in this motion? I even had my son, who was a law student, do research on this issue because I was trying to find some handle for it. And we had none at that point. So I'm sitting there, and then I remembered something. And to tell you what I remembered, I got to give you a little bit of background. Each side has the right to subpoena documents from the other side at the start of the case, or just different points in the case sometimes. And we had subpoenaed a stack of documents from SRF, and they had subpoenaed a stack of documents from us. And among SRF's documents was a fairly substantial section of papers dealing with a disciple, an Indian disciple, whom Yogananda had brought from India to this country to start an SRF work in Washington, D.C. Well, as often happens when you get to America, you get a following and maybe you can do it on your own. Well, this disciple, and I won't name him, I think some of you know who he probably was, he decided to start his own church. And he gave it a name something like Self-Realization Fellowship, but enough different, but he incorporated it separately. And in these discovery papers, there was a long correspondence and even a transcript of an interview that Yogananda had with this disciple, trying to persuade him to come back to the fold, trying to persuade him not to associate with those influences who were causing him to separate from SRF and from his guru, actually. And so I remembered those papers, and I read them many times. And here I'm sitting, I said, oh, wait a minute. There was something in there about, and I go upstairs, I find the papers, I started reading through them again, and there was one sentence. This was after this disciple had started a separate work. It was after he had incorporated that separate work. Yogananda, in a letter to him, said, "Dear one," and he was always so sweet to him, "in your promotional literature, please be sure to use my name and photograph." One sentence. That was the easiest motion we had. They had no response. No response. And that was just pure grace. I mean, I would never have thought of that needle in the haystack, but the grace descended. And I ran upstairs, and there it was. Now, the last thing I want to speak about is, I think it illustrates Swamiji's role perhaps more fully than the example I gave about the mistake I made. But that shows how kind he was. How people are more important than things. Maybe whatever. But this experience was more typical of how he related to me and how he related to most of us involved in the lawsuit. This was just before the end. We had won this motion. We had one more issue to address before we could lay to rest the SRF's case completely. They had appealed midway. They had appealed we won the right to use self-realization. They had the right under the law to take that up immediately. They lost on appeal. They tried to go to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said no. When we gained the right to use Yogananda's name, when they were claiming it was a trademark, they took that up, and they lost on appeal, tried to take it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said no. So they had done their appeals on those issues. We have one big issue left in the case. And this, in many ways, was the heart of SRF's case against us, the passing off motion. Unfair competition, it's called. They said that the only reason we changed our name was to confuse the public into thinking that we were SRF, and that, in fact, we've been doing this for years. We were trying to trade on their good name, passing ourselves off as them. Now, the conventional legal perspective on those kinds of motions, well, how do you prove it? You got lots of facts. You can't find one little sentence and win that motion. You can't. You got to have lots of facts, and it's a kind of motion that traditionally lawyers assume has to go to trial because it's so factually based, and so much depends upon credibility and listening to the witnesses and all of that. And unfair competition is such a vague concept anyway. But once we were finished with the last battle and we had this remaining claim to address, Swami started saying to me very, very sweetly and gently, "No, I think we should bring a summary judgment motion on the passing off claim." I said, "Oh, dear Swamiji, I wish we could." But, it's just, in the law, you just don't bring summary judgment motions on passing off claims. He said, "Oh." So this went on. A couple of weeks passed. As though he hadn't spoken. "I think we should bring a summary judgment motion on the passing off claim." I said, "Swamiji, I'd love to, but you just really can't do that, given the law for these reasons and that, given all the reasons." Oh. Then a little while later, he said, "I think we should bring a summary judgment motion on the passing off claim." And so then I found myself, shortly after he said it a third time, I was at Ananda Village taking a seclusion, and I was in the sunroom in the dome. Just a couple of days off, actually. I wasn't a seclusion. And I was meditating. I said, "No, he must be saying this for a reason." He wouldn't be repeating it, for a reason. And so I meditated on it, and in that moment, I saw, because of the uniqueness of our case, the uniqueness of our evidence, we had a shot at it. We could do it. And so I immediately told him, I said, "Swami, I think there's a way we can bring this motion." He said, "Oh, really good." So go to it. It was a tremendous amount of work. And I want to because of who we were, it was easier. And I want to give you an example of what I mean by that. Because one very critical piece of evidence was pulled together primarily by our dear friend Parvati here. She was one of the troops. And I spoke with her the other day when I was thinking about this. I said, Parvati, I remember it this way. Is this how it happened? She said, yeah, that's how it happened. She said, I actually recorded some of those. I said, okay, I'll tell them all about it. But what happened was, it occurred to me during that revelation I had in the sunroom that we had all these people who had come to the expanding light over the years. If we're passing ourselves off, that's a perfect context for doing it. You get questions all the time. What's your relationship with SRF? Are you a separate organization, this and that and the other? And some people come, oh, these are people who are maybe trying to make up their minds. But the question comes a lot to people who are working on the desk and as teachers there. So we went through the files. We got about 200 names. And bless her heart, Parvati made cold calls to all those people and got their statements. And it meant, she said some people allowed her to record their statements. We drafted them into appropriate legal form. And we had statements from people spanning a long period of time showing that Ananda, if it was going to do this, had every opportunity to do it. Questions were asked. People came with some confusion. We clarified it. They talked to different people. Nobody, no, of course we're not them, because we're not them. and we weren't interested in being mistaken for them. This was something SRF could never understand. And so that was a crucial piece of evidence. We had other evidence. We had reams of evidence. I mean, we had our troops busy, and I won't bore you. Well, I'll just tell you about one other big packet of evidence. They started doing plant calls. Oh, did I reach SRF? Who am I speaking to? Around to all the colonies. It was very amateurish. We saw it in a minute. Oh, who is it? Oh, I thought this was self-realization. Probably no. And so we started writing it all down, and we had a ream of those, and they all followed a certain pattern. They were trying to entrap us, or test, maybe you look at it more charitably, test whether whether we were actually responding properly. So I think Judge Garcia must have gotten a kick out of those, because they were so amateurish, and the same mantra and statement after statement after statement, and many of the people here got those calls. So we had reams of evidence, and so we finished. It was a lot of work. It was perhaps more work, as much work, but maybe not quite as much as the motion to dissolve, to establish that self-realization was a generic term. So we filed our papers. It was very interesting what happened after that. SRF responded, and they didn't respond to our arguments except obliquely. What they did was they held out the possibility of settlement. They were trying to derail the motion, in other words. They held out, they'd never been interested in settlement, but they held out the possibility, and there's Garcia, ooh. Settle. He wants to settle the case, and he says, "I'm not going to rule on this motion right now. I want you all to go to this." He directed us, I think, to someone who could help facilitate the settlement process. He didn't rule on the motion, and he wanted to see if we could settle. And of course, we went through the same little song and dance. Give us back everything you've won, and we'll settle. And we said no, no. But what happened, and this is where Swami's intuition was right on, what happened was that our motion showed them the handwriting on the wall. There was no way they were going to win. They could have a trial for three a year. They weren't going to win that passing off motion, that passing off claim. There was no way they're going to. So what they did, they dismissed the claim. They dismissed it, and they dismissed it in such a way they could never resurrect it again. But it's called with prejudice. They dismissed the claim because at that point, having seen the handwriting on the wall, they were eager to go up on appeal on the a more recent copyright decision, which they thought they had a chance perhaps of reversing, and they did reverse a small piece of that, and that was why the case got remanded back for trial, a very small piece. But that ended the case, and that was Swami's, he was a visionary. You know, at the end of the case, at the end of the lawsuit, I went back through some files, and I looked at a memo that Swami had sent out in the very first weeks of the lawsuit. And he had identified every issue, every potential problem. You know, he even said at one point when we started winning, we will be persecuted. I mean, he had that kind of vision, that kind of understanding. But the greatest blessing of my life, I have to say, was working with him during the years of the court case. It was a deep, deep blessing, and I am eternally grateful.
Well, as having heard these two inspiring speakers from two of our main counsels during the case, John, we were speaking this morning, he came over before coming over here, and I just said something that it had never occurred to me, but one of the great contributions he made, yes, brilliant legal mind, wonderful ability to see strategy and so forth. But to my mind, more important was when every sling and arrow of outrageous fortune was being thrown at Swami, John held an umbrella of dignity and honor over Swami every moment, in every deposition where they were as insulting and cruel and destructive as they possibly could be. He held that umbrella of dignity and honor, and that walked over Swamiji throughout the lawsuit. And the jury and the judge could see in John's relationship to Swami who he was, who Swami was, by the way John related to him. And Naidruva was the heart. At one of our satsangs, she put it so eloquently, this lawsuit is a battle for the hearts and minds of the people of Ananda. And so it was. But she was the heart. She gave us the courage. She gave us, we saw in the working to the point of exhaustion, working to the point of giving beyond anything she had ever done, that compromised her health for some years afterwards. We saw in her that indomitable heart that says, this is a noble cause, and I will, if need be, I will die for it. And it held that up for all of us. And then there was another member of the legal team who is not here physically, only here with us in spirit. And that was our trial lawyer for the grand finale, Rob Christopher. Most of you, excuse me a moment. Most of you don't know him as well as you know John and Naidruva, but he was a great warrior. I remember the first day we went into his office. He's a big man. He was an athlete, and he had this very unusual looking mace in his office. And we said, what is that? And he said, oh, it's the mace that the Russian guard of the Tsar used. And that's what he felt like. He felt like he was the protective guard of the king. And so he couldn't be with us today, but he sent a letter that he wanted us to share with you, and I want to read it. Dear all, and by the way, this letter convinces you, as Naidruva and John did, contrary to popular opinion, lawyers have great senses of humor. I don't think you could be a lawyer if you didn't have a sense of humor. Okay, so this is what Rob Christopher says. Dear all, I'm very sorry I can't be there with you to celebrate the retiring of the legal debt burden to which we lawyers so greatly contributed. if I'm going to do a confession, I may as well drag John and Rich down into the mud with me. Rich was his associate. My wife, Ginny, and I are currently on a long-planned vacation in the Charleston, South Carolina area. Peter Marshall, the Scottish-American preacher who served twice as chaplain of the United States Senate, wrote of suffering. When we long for life without difficulties, O Lord, remind us that oaks grow strong in contrary winds and diamonds are made under pressure. I can think of no more fitting sentiment and epitaph for the costly and unjust ordeal you endured over 10 years ago now. The contrary winds and incredible pressures that you have survived would have destroyed any lesser cause, any lesser faith. I know, therefore, that you will persevere through whatever challenges you face in the new era just begun with the recent passing of Swami Kriyananda. I thank you for this rare second chance to share yet a few more thoughts about the legal war we fought together. Late last year, I pulled out and watched again my now treasured video of the 2003 legal satsang at the village. After getting over how young we all looked, I was reminded by this enduring record of both what we achieved together and how thankful I still am from the bottom of my heart to you especially you, who chose me, and you who worked with me for the extraordinary opportunity to have served your community in a time of real significance and need. Few are the genuine moments in any private legal career when we truly enjoy meaningful success for the best of people and the worthiest of clients. I have come to believe that all our lives are better for that terrible test of wills and faith. I hope to learn from you on a later occasion if and how that is true for you. For myself, I absolutely know it is because, first, you inspired in me a sense of karmic balance and destiny, and a belief that sometimes the touch of God can be palpably real. I recall vividly the moments that it seemed there was a divine presence at our shoulders, helping us to make right judgment calls, helping our judge somehow to hear the truth of critical arguments, sometimes arguments that he had already once declined to hear, helping our jury to see who you really are and what SRF was really trying to do, and even tossing the, quote, bad guy out of the courtroom in a moment I've never seen or heard of before or since. If you don't know what he's referring to, read Faith is My Armor. Excuse me, A Fight for Religious Freedom. Second, a couple of years ago, I tried to a jury another big case against an underhanded, powerful, determined, and even more well-financed foe. And thanks to you, I was ready, and so a good company saved its reputation and was fully compensated for millions of dollars in commercial loss. Third, you also helped me fully understand the waste that our legal system often commits in the name of justice and the need to do something about it. Subsequently, I recently decided to focus my professional energy on an innovative company and a non-adversarial method for good people to resolve honest disputes fairly, quickly, and inexpensively. The name of the company is Just Resolve. Please visit my website and tell me what you think. Finally, you gave me the following indelible memory snapshots to enjoy. That first meeting in my San Jose conference room with what I still think of as the committee. A later first introduction to Kriyananda in Palo Alto. The first hearings in Sacramento with Judge Garcia. The challenging video deposition of Diamata in Los Angeles, dealing with the dark villainy and hypocrisy of certain opposing counsel who paraded as crusaders of righteousness, finding and presenting and cross-examining experts about a sideshow involving a Mexican copyright, the nightly trade-off of sleep versus preparation during the weeks of trial by all members of an egoless, unselfish team. quiet walks along the Sacramento River bank to try to capture clear perspectives, the extra preparation by all our witnesses and team so that none could be falsely portrayed as, quote, bad people, our success in putting their lawyers and our real intention on trial, the indomitable spirits, invaluable contributions, and always encouraging faces of Nidruva, Kathy, the Smollins, the Novaks, the Pravers, Kathy, Rich, John, and so many others. Let me close as I began and repeat how truly sorry we lawyers are that you had to pay such a high price and in so many ways to be our favorite client of all time. Most worthy career opportunity, most cherished win. But we are joyously glad to have been chosen to make the journey with you. Very warmest regards, Rob Christopher. If any of you would like a copy of that email, we can get it to you. So there's another member, as I think is evident to all of us today, of the legal team who is not present in body, but only in spirit. And that, of course, is Swamiji. As Nidruva said, he was not only gave inspiration, but the clarity and the strategy for how to fight this battle that we won. But what I want to share with you now is what I really learned from those days, what Swamiji taught us. And that was not only how to fight a legal battle, but how to fight the battle of life. And in a way, the lawsuit was just a small part of that battle. And there were things that he showed us throughout his life, in particular during this, that will be what continues on into the future for all of us. Of course, the first point is Dharma. There were so many times we could have compromised, and in doing so would have had an advantage. And our adversaries did it all the time. Swami would never compromise what was true, what was real, what he wanted to be Ananda's legacy. And so in the battle of life, that too is something we need to bring forward, to never compromise your principles, because when you do that, you've already lost, no matter what the world says. When we lose that, we lose everything. The second thing that Swami showed us about how to win the battle of life is indomitable energy. No matter what came, we were there. There was untiring moving forward. And it was particularly on those, as Nidruva was saying, there were many nights that they got no sleep whatsoever and had to appear in court with no sleep many nights running. But Swami was with us. He was showing us, this is how you fight the battle of life. You don't stop till it's done. And there are so many examples in all of Ananda's history where he's demonstrated that. But as well as that, to win the battle of life, Swami brought joy and enthusiasm. And even in the darkest hours, he found some way to make it fun. Whether it was flipping crumbs with a knife on the dining room table, whatever it might be, he always found a way to make it be fun. And to fight the battle of life, it's like there has to be that indomitable energy, but then there has to be the flow of joy, because that's what sustains the energy. And he showed us that, and we lived that. And that's what kept us going. And so that enthusiasm and that joy, and to always be kind. Some of you know, some of you don't know, the incredible effort to destroy Swamiji personally. I remember when I was having my deposition taken by he who shall not be named. he was yelling at me and ranting at me. And then when it was all done, I was leaving, and he just turned to me and he screamed, "You tell your Swami we're going to destroy him." Just like that. And I was sort of stunned, and I remember John very kindly ushered me out of the room because I was sort of rooted to the spot. But in the midst of all that, Swami never, ever had animosity toward any of them. He stood his ground, he told his truth, he opposed their lies, but it was not with personal animosity. It was always with kindness. And I think even at the last moment, if they would have come forward and said, let's let all of this be gone, he would have done it. He would have done it because he loved them to the end. To win the battle of life, we need that kind of kindness, patience, compassion, always, never to lose sight of it. I remember once when our son was quite little, he had done something naughty, and we had disciplined him. And Kriyananda Swamiji happened to be there. And well, Kalidasa went up to Swami and he said, "Swami, do you like bad people?" And Swami looked at him and he said, "I love the people. I don't always like the things they do." And that was how Swami approached all of them during the lawsuit. And then finally, incredible faith. You know, in the book, Faith is My Armor, the title comes from a quote of Swamiji's, where after the lawsuit we were talking, and I said to him, "Swamiji, I don't really think I have the kind of strength to endure what you've endured in your life," not only thinking of the lawsuit, but everything he's had to go through. And he very quietly said, "I didn't know that I had the strength, but faith is my armor." And that's what we all need to live in, that faith. So the slogan for the legal campaign that we launched to pay it off was Aum, A-U-M, Ananda's United Mission. And so as this mission moves forward, will we face adversity in the future? Unquestionably. Will it be more intense than what we faced already? Probably. But what we have through our beloved Swamiji is how to fight the battle of life. Whatever comes, I often think that the lawsuit was just to prove to us. It wasn't about all the manipulations and this picture and that copyright, but it was simply to show us, using these principles, you can succeed at anything. And I feel that in my heart, and I know all of us who walk that battle, fought in that battle, feel it. So as Ananda's United Mission moves forward, whatever lies ahead, through the grace of Swami, his guidance, his blessing, his example, we can win the battle. And Ananda's United Mission moves on in this great wave of grace and blessings and light, that the impact on the world is beyond anything I think that we can imagine at this point. So, what a great moment, and what a great victory. Brave are the people who lived in these hills, and we thank you all for everything you have done to bring us to this point. So now we're going to end with a ceremony, and as we speak, our stalwart crew are going to be bringing things up on the stage. This is something we're going to do, kind of a symbolic celebration now of the end of the lawsuit and the beginning of a new era. We're going to have this fire ceremony. We'll bring it in the middle of the stage.
Okay. We'll bring it in the middle of the
Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to invite the members of the legal team to come up. And why don't we do that now? We can. Yeah, Catherine, I'm sorry. Okay. So first of all, this is the legal team that was so involved in all those years. I think you know everyone. They were involved with everything. And not only the legal proceedings, but keeping the faith, keeping the strength and the support of everyone high so that we can endure that. So we also want to invite the colony leaders up now, come, and from Seattle and Portland, from India. Parvati and Pranaba were the colony leaders during the lawsuit in Seattle, excuse me. Portland, excuse me. One of those places. And Ananta Maria were the colony leaders in Sacramento and hosted us and fed us and gave us foot rubs and shoulder rubs through the long weeks. And Narayana Dharma Devi from LA. So what we're going to do now is we'd like you all to stand and you can pass around this basket of rice, and you're going to need to get rid of the fire. And take enough rice so that we're going to throw it in 3 times, so tighten up the rank. So we're going to maybe need to be too deep or something. Yeah, that's good. So what we're going to do, and we want you all to participate, we're going to just, all of us will take some rice and we'll 3 times throw it in the fire and chant Om. And this is representing of the burning up of the old karma, but also offering up the tapasya that everyone went through for this process, and that it's gone. The Divine Mother just takes it in her loving arms. So don't throw it all in at once. Okay, so I want you to, as we chant Om, raise your hands and we'll chant Om together. We'll Om Swaha, and we'll throw it into the fire, and then let's chant Om after that. So, Om Swaha, Om Swaha, Om Swaha. Let's all chant Om together, offering this karma, this pasya, up into God's consciousness, that we be freed of it, and Nanda can move forward.
Now we will each take a votive candle. If the conditions had been more clement, or we had been inside, we would have lit those votive candles from this fire, because those votive candles represent to all of us the efforts from the past that are now released the potential of the future of Ananda. And so each of us will take a votive candle and we'll hold those up, and again we'll chant Om 3 times.
Sorry, I should have announced that Catherine is up here on the stage because she was the one that started all the incredible fundraising and information sharing about the lawsuit and continued faithfully, and without her, we would never have been able to figure this out.
She kept filling the gas tank.
Okay, hold your candle aloft. This is the light of Ananda, of God and Guru, of Master and Swamiji, that will continue throughout the world as long as there are receptive souls to draw from it. A new era of Ananda has begun. Let us chant Om and feel that we can draw the grace and guidance to continue Ananda in the spirit with which it has been started by Swamiji.
Let's end with a prayer, keeping immense gratitude in our hearts for this beautiful learning experience that has been given to us. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we humbly bow to you all. O Divine Mother, Master and Swamiji, we thank you for being our teachers, our supporters, those who have loved us forever. May we be worthy instruments to bring thy light forward, to touch the hearts of millions. Om. Peace. Amen. Thank you all for coming, and there will...
David, could you lead us all in singing Brave Are the People?
Yes.
Not...
He had a stunned look on his face, thinking, now that is not my choir.
Do we have our guitars? Good. Yeah.
So just to recap the words, brave are the people who lived in these hills, brave the great warriors who confronted the foe. And as we sing, try to identify, think through the words and see how much you can identify with these words, how much ring true. This music is so powerful because we sing not only what we believe, but what we have experienced. And so bring all of that forward as we go.
To defend what is holy, to defend what is true. Our Lord